few weeks ago, I reviewed Huion's latest 19-inch tablet. It is designed to go head-to-head against Wacom's highest-end Cintiq Pros. Today, I'm taking a look at both of those tablets, and I'm throwing in an XPPen tablet for good measure, and we're gonna see what are the differences here and how do they compare. Hello, my name is Brad. I review tech for creative professionals, and this is a fun video to have because for years, Huion has been getting closer and closer and closer and closer to Wacom's tech, but they're never quite there, at least from the pen standpoint. And I feel like here, with this release, they've pretty much nailed it. But Wacom has been pushing ahead in some other areas as well, specifically some of the color ranges they cover. Huion is also pushing ahead in some of those areas too, even though it's not quite there yet. So this comparison becomes really interesting, especially when you start to look at price. Wacom's 17-inch tablet is starting at $2,500. Huion's 19-inch tablet is starting at $1,100. So we're talking about a huge price difference here. So you might think that there's also a huge quality difference, but there's not. There are some key things to know though. So to get this all started, let's break these things down spec by spec. Quick shout out, I've got 2 courses, Learn to Draw in 60 Days and Intro to Digital Art over at bradsartschool.com. Check those out if you're just jumping into digital art or wanting to learn more about drawing. Back to the video. The screen size of the Wacom Cintiq Pro is 17.3 inches. It's got a display resolution of 3,840 pixels by 2,160 pixels. Yes, that's full 4K. It's an IPS display. It's got edge-to-edge tempered glass with an AG etching. What that means is they've added a texture to it, so when you're running your pen across it, you have a little bit more grip than you would on a smooth glass screen. Another feature you only see in these high-end tablets is it's also a multi-touch display, so you can pinch to zoom if your drawing app lets you, or use hand gestures for other things. Now for most of those specs, Huion is matching that, although this is a slightly larger tablet. The display size is coming in at 18.4 inches. It is full 4K, 3,840 pixels by 2,160 pixels. This does have an anti-glare coating over the screen, so you do have some texture when you're drawing on it. And it is a multi-touch display. One thing to note about that is it's multi-touch on Windows, but it is not multi-touch on Mac. That feature doesn't work there. On the Wacom, it does. Those are the features that I'm most interested in. Can I get this high resolution? Do the colors look good? You know, is there multi-touch available? But there's some other things that Wacom has started to add here that Huion's trying to catch up with, and really where that starts to show is in the color spaces. They both have 1,000:1 contrast ratios. They both have very good viewing angles. Wacom's coming in at 85 degrees, and Huion is as well. The colors on both of these displays look very, very good. Now, one thing to note is when you do put like an anti-glare coating or an etching on top of that, it is going to dull the colors a little bit. It's not going to pop quite as much as like, say, an OLED screen that's really shiny and that sort of thing. But for IPS displays, they're not bad. Taking a look at the color ranges, we have DCI-P is 99% on the Wacom, Adobe RGB is 88% on the Wacom, and the Rec 709 is 100% on the Wacom. The Huion has a DCI-P3 of 98% and Adobe RGB of 96%, but it doesn't cover the Rec 709 profile like the Wacom does. I've said this in my reviews before, I'm not a hardcore color guy. If I can get my Adobe range up in the 90s, the color looks really good to me. Some people, photographers, animators, filmmakers, need that higher range color. That's where some of those other profiles come into play. That's why Wacom is supporting that Rec 709 color profile. And from my understanding, when you start to support some of those higher color profiles, that's where the cost of these displays really start to go up. That's where you see some of those really, really expensive studio monitors come into play. And that's what Wacom is going for here in their Pro line. And that's also why this Wacom Cintiq Pro 17 cost $1,000 more than their Cintiq Pro 16 did just about 2 years ago. So what we're really seeing here is Huion with this 19-inch version really catching up with where Wacom was in the color space about 2 years ago. Now the good news here is if you've never heard of DCI-P before, you don't need it. If you've never heard of Rec 709, you don't need it. I personally don't need it. I personally can't see the difference. But if you work in an animation studio and you need to make sure that your colors are accurate so that you know it's going to look good on a giant theater screen when it's projected, but also on home TVs, that sort of thing is far more important. If you're a photographer and you need those super accurate colors because you need to know what it's going to look like when it's printed versus what it looks like on the screen, those sort of things become really important. And that's where the difference in price comes in. Now, looking at these two things next to each other, the Wacom does look thicker, it looks bulkier, but weight-wise, it's only a little bit heavier. The Huion is 4.4 pounds, and the Wacom is 4.9 pounds. However, the Huion is like 2 inches bigger. Now, some of the smaller and lightweight displays out there that have been rolling out the last few years, you can power with just one USB Type-C cable. So if you have a Thunderbolt port, you can just run it to your Mac, directly to the tablet, and the whole thing will work without an extra power cable. With both of these devices, you will need extra power to make them work properly. They're just too big and they suck up too much power for you not to. So even though they don't weigh that much, they're not like super portable. You can take them with you, but you also need to account for the size. Will this actually fit in your bag? And also that extra weight. Now, before I go and start talking about the drawing experience, I do want to throw another contender in here. This is one of my favorite drawing tablets that I used last year. This is the XPPen Artist Pro 16 Gen 2. This is fairly thin, fairly light. It's also got some feet underneath so you can fold those out, lay it at a nice angle. Even though this is 16 inches, it's coming in at a slightly lower display resolution. This is 2560 pixels by 1600 pixels. It's kind of like a 1440p monitor. It's fully laminated. It has a slightly better contrast ratio of 1200 to 1. It does 97% Adobe RGB, so it is in the Brad, wow, this looks good zone. And it starts at $600. I should also point out this is not a touch display, but if you're just looking at price ratio things, this has a lot of the same features that the others have, but you're coming in at a lower price because you're losing some of those higher end features. I did mention the feet on this XPPen, they fold out. The same thing is happening on the 19-inch Huion. It's a nice way to set it up at just a very comfortable drawing angle. In the past, Huion displays that were coming in, usually a little bit bigger than this size, often had their own adjustable stand, so you could set it up at 90 degrees and actually use it as a monitor when you're not drawing on it. You can still do that here. Both the XPPen and the Huion have a VESA mount, so if you did want to go that route, you totally can. In fact, you could do that with the Wacom as well. The Wacom comes with these two metal bars that act as a stand when you kind of screw them on. You can also purchase like an extra stand. I think that's about $500. Sounds like a lot for a stand. It is a lot for a stand. Wacom did send me one of those to test out. It is a really nice stand because you could like tilt this. You can't like flip it fully around, but you could tilt it at different angles. And one of the nice things about the stand is that like if you pull it up high and you draw on it like that, it stays. Like you can lock that sucker into place. Just a very elegant stand. You are going to be paying a lot for that stand, but rest assured you're getting a very nice stand for that price. Wacom has some shortcut keys along the back. It has like this molded plastic, like that act as like almost like video game controller handles. So if you're holding on to the tablet, you can actually program those shortcut keys along the side for various things. There aren't too many of them, but it gets the job done for most of the things I want to do. Undoing, brush sizing, that sort of thing. Both the Wacom and the XPPen come with little shortcut remotes. They're not like the highest end, fanciest things, but again, they also get the job done. Those are fully programmable. Okay. I'll get to the pen. So here we are. My feelings with these pens is it's just been kind of fascinating to review this stuff over the years because 5-6 years ago, Wacom was just so far ahead of Huion and XPPen in terms of their just pen technology. Now, right now, Wacom's pen is 8,000 levels of pressure sensitivity. Huion and XPPen have kind of jumped over them, and at least in that number. I don't think that number matters as much. 16,000 levels that you find on Huion and XPPen sounds really good. I guess it's good to have if you can put it in your pen, but I didn't really find it to improve performance in any way. I don't feel those extra levels of pressure. What I have noticed, especially in Huion, is that they've really reduced the amount of wiggle or slight wobble or wave that you have on slow angled lines. That was one of the things that everybody had a hard time like replicating Wacom's experience with. In this latest generation, I saw it on Huion's 27-inch and on this 19-inch, they've really nailed that. XPPen still has a tiny bit of that, but not nearly as much as they used to. So XPPen has even really closed the gap there. So for all the things that I use the pen for, I think it really matches up well with the Wacom, even surpasses it in some way. For example, on the Wacom with really fast strokes, they don't taper as well as they do on the Huion. Huion. That's a minor quibble because you could adjust that in the brushes in your application, but it's still worth noting. But it's crazy that we have gotten to this point that all three of those pens are just fantastic. The way they hold pressure, the way they're responsive, the initial activation rate, which if you want to like sketch really lightly, you could totally do that with any of these pens. They all work so well nowadays. And I could say that in general about all of these products is none of them are bad. They're all really good. So some of the things that we're looking at and some of the details that we're nitpicking here are just that. We're really nitpicking them. And a lot of the features that they're adding in here, like those higher end color spectrums and things like that, a lot of people don't necessarily need. But it's really great that they exist for the people that do. Many of these videos in the past, I used to award a winner. I'd have like a little trophy pop up on the screen. It would be fun. It's hard to do that here. I think the 19-inch Huion is really, really nice. I love the fact that there's a touch mode there, that the pen works extraordinarily well. The 4K is fantastic. The downside there is that if you're using a Mac, you're not getting a lot of those features. You're losing those touch features at least. And so maybe if you're a Mac user, it's not worth paying the extra for that. On the Wacom side, if you're not using a lot of those color features, it may not be worth paying all that extra for it. On the XPPen side, I mean, it's an inexpensive display. It's $600. You're not losing too much. You're losing some of that resolution, but I find at 16 inches, 1440p, actually looks pretty good. You can also buy Huion and XPPen and even some Wacom tablets that come in at 1080p. That's where you start to see the pixels, but 1440 looks good. And at the end of the day, I recommend all three of these. It comes down to the price and what features you really need. But what do you think? Let me know down below in the comments. Thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you in a couple of days.